Welcome back to the show today. I want to share some thoughts with you on get the fear out. Get the fear out. And I am not a great example of getting the fear out, but some of the concepts I want to share with you today, I hope are going to help you and I get some of the fear out. And I chose this city because we're way up. And I am not a great fan of heights, so as I get so close to the edge of this building, it just makes my skin crawl because it's so close, and I don't like falling. Let me give you a backstory real quick. Back when I was before 2 years old, I had fallen down a flight of steps. I can remember as it happened just the other day. And from that moment on, I was afraid of falling. And that fear is just one example of what we're going to be talking about here today in the show. Now, have you ever noticed that in some people's lives, they assume the worst, and that really stops them from taking big steps in life? I know I've assumed the worst for too many years, and that has stopped me periodically from taking big steps in my life. And have you ever maybe been offered an opportunity that's way outside your comfort zone, so you decide to decline the offer on the opportunity? And I believe that the reason why you and I decline the opportunities is because of fear. You're afraid that you're going to fall on your face. You're afraid that you're not going to succeed in whatever you're trying to do with that opportunity. Now, what if I told you that there's a huge percentage of people that don't really achieve anything great in life because of fear? And if you stop and think about it yourself, if you stop and look in the mirror and think about all the opportunities that you've bypassed in your life because of fear. And I think there's probably more than a few. They fear what negative things could happen. They fear failing. That's a huge one. They fear being ridiculed and called nasty names. And fear keeps them in their comfort zone where it's nice and warm and cozy and not out here on the edge of life and realizing that there's nothing to catch you if you were to step out and do the extraordinary. Now, your body actually releases cortisol and adrenaline and makes you really stressed and fearful, which literally reduces your ability to respond in a positive manner. See, humans have the ability, unlike animals, that we manufacture realities that really only live in your mind. How many times haven't your imagination gone crazy? Your heart rate starts going, your blood pressure goes up, and everything you're thinking is not even reality, but your body's reacting to what you're thinking. I think it's happened to all of us. So we have the capacity to create worst case scenarios just by our thinking, even before we attempt anything great because of fear. And that's all from us imagining bad things happen. What if you were to redefine maybe what you have to do and what you must do? Think about that a second. How many times haven't you put things off because you feel that you have to do them instead of reframing that to decide this is what I must do to overcome some level of fear? This is what I had to do personally with public speaking. I was terrified of public speaking for different reasons that we're not going to get into here. I was afraid of being rejected. I was afraid of looking incompetent. It terrorized me to the point that I had to, back in 1983, 84, I had to reframe my fear and realize that everything that has ever happened in anybody's life that's been great, they were able to overcome their fear. Fear is nothing more than not having really the correct information about something and also not knowing the facts. I believe that the majority of people today have not chosen to realize big dreams in their life because they've allowed fear. Know this up front, that you're definitely going to fail in any attempt that you try for the first time, maybe the first 10 times, maybe the first 100 times. But the people who exceed and do well in life, they keep getting back up, they keep tweaking their skill sets just a little bit, and they master these skill sets until what they were afraid of, falling off the edge of life, to the point of them not being afraid at all. Now, your identity needs to be tied to overcoming fear. Your identity needs to be tied to overcoming fear, because when you purposely detach your mind from your fear, then fear, or the power of fear, really has no power over you. Albert Einstein said one time, only one who devotes himself to a cause with his whole strength and soul can be a true master. For this reason, mastery demands all of a person. That is, you got to give yourself completely. Let me give you another silly example, I guess, is if you were in a swimming pool, you can't just swim halfway and not drown. I mean, you have to swim all the way in order to keep yourself above the water. That's the way it is about life. You know, if you ever really want to master life, you have to do it completely. You have to do it wholly. W-H-O-L-L-Y. If you're serious about overcoming fear, you have to write down what life is going to look like if you master fear. Fear dominated my life for a good 20 to 30 years. It really did, to my embarrassment. And I wonder if you may be dominated by fear also. You've allowed people and you've allowed situations in your life to distract you from really doing the things that you ought to be doing anyway. Author Brendan Burchard writes, listen, our self-image is a self-fulfilling prophecy. Remember, our human drive makes us behave, listen, in accordance to that image. So if you're running your life based on the old, outdated, past self-image shaped by others' opinions and actions, then you're in big trouble, he says. There are two things that change your life. Either something new comes into your life or something new comes out of you. That is, in this case, in this story, fear. Fear. Because if you choose not to be mentally all in, then it leaves a huge gap of fear that's going to dominate your life in a big way. Your desire and your obsession really to succeed must be stronger than the fear in your mind. Your identity must be tied to your desire to achieve greatness in life. And I can only speak from my experience, but there are people that will attempt to drag you down as you attempt to do awesome things. It's interesting that they'll complain about you, they'll harass you, they'll call you names, they'll think that maybe your ambitions are selfish instead of selfless. But all these people that are tearing you down of you trying to do great things, what are they doing in life? Nothing. Zero. But they're willing to drag you down or attempt to drag you down. So you must believe that what you want to happen in your life will happen. There's power in the power of expectancy. Again, there's power in the power of expectancy. You have to believe that you can overcome your fear and dominate it. If you believe your fear will dominate your life, then fear will dominate your life. It's pretty simple, right? So now what? Now what do? You have to do what you fear most every single day. Now, again, as I said in the beginning of the show, heights bother me greatly. The closer I get to the edge of something that's high off the ground, like where I am right now, I get woozy. When my wife and kids want to go to the carnival or to a park and they have a Ferris wheel, I stay on the ground. I'll take the pictures from the ground up. They have these things in Hershey Park, Pennsylvania, where you go way up, 10 or 12 stories in the air. Not me. I stay on the ground. So again, I haven't mastered this myself. I'm still trying to master it every single day. Now, there's people that are afraid of snakes and like I said in the beginning, public speaking and being closed in small spaces. Fear takes on a variety of shapes and sizes. Some people are afraid of spiders and needles and getting shots in their arms, or some people are afraid of mice, maybe flying on an airplane. I can remember the first time I flew on an airplane. I was in my teens and I was terrified, man. I was sweating and I was really, really nervous. And mind you, because I'm scared of heights, I'm scared of falling, so you think, man, I'd be more scared in a plane. Well, after I rode the plane the first time, I wasn't afraid of flying anymore. Does it make sense? But yet I'm afraid to be on a 6-foot ladder or a 10-foot ladder that I'm going to fall, but I'm not afraid of being in a plane. Again, fear is not logical. It's not. We exaggerate the bad things that could happen instead of magnifying the good things that could happen. Some people are afraid of dogs. I have clients that are terrified of dogs. I have clients that are afraid of multitudes of things. Now, there's a story in the Bible that talks about this guy named Gideon. And this guy was, let's just say he was afraid of most things. So the story says, let me just share a piece of the story that maybe will help you today. He says, but one day the angel of the Lord came and sat beneath this oak tree on the farm of this particular guy. And this Gideon guy, his name is, he had been threshing wheat back, we're talking 4,000 years ago. He was dealing with grapes and wheat, and he was hiding from this enemy horde called the Midianites. So it says here in verse 12, it says, the angel of the Lord appeared to him and said, quote, "Mighty soldier, God is with you." "Stranger," Gideon replied, "if the Lord is with us, why has all this happened to us? And where are all the miracles our ancestors told us about, where God brought them out of Egypt, and now the Lord's thrown us away and let the Midianites ruin us?" Then the Lord, it says, turned to him, and he says, "I will make you strong." This is a paraphrase. He says, "Go and save the Midianites. I am sending you." Let me pause the story for just a minute. Moments ago, I said that he was hiding out. He was afraid. He was in the lowest part of this place because he was afraid of this hoarding enemy that was going to try to kill all of his folks. So he said, think about this. I just described how the Midianites were greatly fierce, but he says, how can I save my country? Because he says that he was one of the least of these. He was one of the lowest on the totem pole. How many times haven't you felt that you were the lowest on the totem pole, in quotes, that you don't think that what is possible for you, certainly for other people? Think about that in your own life. You and I have chosen in different times in our lives not to undertake great things in our lives because we didn't think we had the capacity to do it. Let me think about that a minute. Sometimes when you and I have a passion to do something, maybe you have been, I'll use the word loosely, called to do different things in life, maybe because other people have chosen not to do that. Maybe those people have chosen not to stretch out and do the extraordinary. So in Judges, in the Old Testament in the Bible, in chapter 7, in the Living Bible, which is a very loose paraphrase of this text, it says Gideon and his army, he was finally talked into doing this. Listen to this. They got an early start and went as far as this certain spring of water. The armies of the enemy army were camped north of them and down in the valley beside this certain hill. And then the story says that God said to Gideon, "There are too many of you. I can't let all these fight the Midianites, and then the people will boast to me that they have saved themselves by their own strength. Send home any of your men who are timid and frightened," the paraphrase said. Now he had a lot of guys, so listen to this. So 22,000 of them left, and only 10,000 remained who are willing to fight. So 22,000 guys were scared out of their mind and said, "There's no way I'm fighting this enemy. I'm here because I have to be. But now you've given me an option to go home. I'm going home." They hit the road, right? Verse 4. But God told Gideon, "There are still too many. Bring them down to this spring of water, and I'll show you which ones shall go with you and which ones shall not." So Gideon assembled them at the water. So God told him, "Divide them into two groups, decided by the way they drink. If group one will be all the men who cup the water with their hands and get it to their mouths and or lap it like a dog, and then the two who will kneel with their mouths in the stream. Only 300 of the men drank from their hands, and the others drank with their mouths full in the stream," which in that system, in that culture, exposed your back to the enemy. So the guys that cupped water with their hands, they still had one eye on what's going on around them, right? So verse 7, he says, "I'll conquer the Midianites with these 300 people." These 300 people, the Lord told Gideon, "Send all the others home. Send all the others home." So after Gideon had collected the clay jars and trumpets they had among them, he sent them home, leaving only 300 men with them. So again, in the next part, it says, but as soon as all this happened, they realized very quickly that with just 300 men, they were able to do extraordinary things. Think about that a second. How many times haven't you assumed, how many times haven't I assumed that it's going to take a lot of people to do extraordinary things? If you go through just American history, the very few people were able to accomplish great things because they decided that they were going to push through what scared the stuffings out of them. George Washington, the first president of the United States, he commanded forces in numerous battles and defended our country against the British and risked his life to save others. You see, he seems, the story says, fearless, right? But really wrong. He had a very serious fear of premature burial, as he called it. This was clearly expressed on his deathbed in 1799, where he made his attendants promise that his body would be left out for 2 days in case he was still alive. He was afraid. George Washington was afraid. Alfred Hitchcock, the famous Hollywood director and producer, known for movies such as Psycho and Vertigo, had an extreme fear of eggs. Yes, eggs. He said that they were revolting to him. He stated that he never tasted an egg in his whole life, and he even refused to be around them. He claimed that nothing was more revolting to him than seeing a white round thing with no holes spill its yellow liquid. It was unknown why a man like Hitchcock would have such a random fear. These are people that we've heard of before. Oprah Winfrey, the queen of daytime television, has a great phobia of gum chewing. This began for her at an early age when her grandmother would collect gum and keep it in rows on a cabinet. Oprah was so revolted by this that it caused her to fear gum for the rest of her life. One time she said she threw out a plate because it had a piece of gum on it. She was so sickened by gum chewing that she banned it on her television studio. Surprisingly, her employees and studio audience usually cooperate and give her no reason to fear. You see, fear happens when we don't know our capacity, when we don't know our capabilities. Fear is a magnification of reality. Let me say it a different way. Fear is a distortion of reality. Again, fear is a distortion of reality. I found that many, many people believe that brave people have always been brave. But this obviously has not been the case. I've met several people who were scared out of their mind, but moved forward anyway. They felt the reward of doing was scary, but was way better than remaining in fear. I think many times, at least for me, maybe for you too, that the unknown keeps many people from being fearless. Again, the unknown keeps people from being fearless. They live in what could be versus what is. I think many people are afraid to fall while they're on this journey forward, and falling really is part of the journey forward. That's something that it took me a long time to get through my thick head, is that I didn't realize that most successful people fall more times than they succeed. More successful people fail more times than they succeed, like hundreds of times more times than they succeed. So fearlessness happens when you walk through fear with your eyes open. Again, fearlessness happens when you walk through fear with your eyes open. Back in the early 90s, I had an insurance client in a part of Baltimore City in Maryland who had a certain kind of a dog. I cannot remember the type of dog, but it was a big dog, and he was very aggressive, it seemed. So I would never go inside their fenced gate. I would kind of yell. I would try to call them from the car or from the street saying that I'm here to see you, but I would never open that gate because that dog would come running out and it was slobbering everywhere, and I was terrified of this dog. So one day I get there and the client meets me at the gate, and the dog's right there. I mean, a few feet from the client, and she said, "Why don't you come on in?" I said, "Well, can you put the dog away?" Now, mind you, I'm not typically scared of dogs, but this was a pretty big dog, and a big bark and big teeth and the whole bit. So she said, "Come on in, he's not going to hurt you." I said, "Well," and I really don't want to take a chance, but I didn't want to offend this client at all. So I took the step and opened the gate, and within about 10 minutes or so, the dog was, when I was in the house, was on my lap, slobbering all over me, licking on me, kissing me, And all this time, months of not going to see that client because I was afraid of the dog, turned out to be false, turned out to be exaggerated. Another situation I was in York, Pennsylvania, seeing a client, sitting in their house. So I was here, and my client was here. And I'm facing my client, talking to her about business and other things. But I felt a presence walk into this room. I didn't know what it was, but I didn't want to stop making eye contact with my client. I didn't want to be rude. But all of a sudden, I noticed a smirk on my client's face. So I casually looked to my side here, and there was a Rottweiler, which is a humongous dog, eye level with me. And let me tell you, I'll be polite, but my bladder was like ready to, it scared the bejesus out of me, right? I was terrified. This humongous dog, again, he was eye level with me. So what's that, 2 feet, 3 feet off the ground, right? So all of a sudden the dog started to kiss me and lick on me. The whole point is sometimes you and I exaggerate our fears to be something when it turns out to be nothing at all. So we waste years and months of our time worrying and stressing about stuff that really isn't worth us getting stressed about at all. Taylor Swift said this, "To me, fearless is not the absence of fear. It's not being completely unafraid. To me, fearless is having fears. Fearless is having doubts, lots of them," she said. "To me, fearless is living, listen, in spite of those things that scare you to death." That scare you to death. How many times haven't you chosen not to take on certain things in life because you are scared out of your mind? Max Lucado is a great author, and I want to share some of his words when he talked about fear. He said, "Each sunrise seems to bring fresh reasons for fear. They're talking layoffs at work, slowdowns in the economy, flare-ups in the Middle East, turnovers at headquarters, downturns in the housing market, upswings in global warming, breakouts of Al-Qaeda cells, some demented dictators collecting nuclear warheads like others collect fine wines. A strain of Asian flu is boarding flights out of China, and the plague of our day and terrorism brings all kinds of terror." He says, "News programs distort enough hand-wringing information to warrant an advisory. Caution, this news report is best viewed in the confines of an underground vault in Iceland. We fear being sued, finishing last, going broke. We fear the mole on the back, the new kid on the block, the sound of the clock as it ticks closer to the grave. We sophisticate investment plans and create elaborate security systems," he says, "and stronger military. Yet we depend on mood-altering drugs more than any generation in history. Moreover, the average child today has the same level of anxiety as the average psychiatric patient does or did in the 1950s. He says, "Fear, it seems, has taken a 100-year lease on the building next door and set up shop." He says, oversized and rude, unwilling to share the heart of happiness, happiness complies. Do you ever see the two together? Can one be happy and afraid at the same time? Clear thinking and afraid? Confident and afraid? Merciful and afraid? No. Fear, listen, fear, he says, is the big bully. Fear is the big bully in the high school hallway, brash and loud and unproductive. For all the noise fear makes and room it takes, fear does little good. Again, fear does little good. Fear never wrote a symphony or a poem, negotiated a peace treaty, or cured a disease. Fear never pulled a family out of poverty or a country out of bigotry. No. Fear never saved a marriage or a business. Courage did that, he said. Faith did that. People who refused to consult or cower to their timidities did that. But fear itself, fear, he says, Max Lucado says, fear herds us into a prison of unlocked doors. Again, fear herds us into a prison of unlocked doors. Wouldn't it be great to walk out? He says, imagine your life wholly untouched by angst. What if faith, not fear, was your default reaction to threats? If you could hover a fear magnet over the heart and extract every last shaving of dread and insecurity and doubt, what would that remain? What would remain? Envision a day, just one day, absence of dread of failure, rejected, or calamity. Can you imagine a life with no fear? So he ends, why are you afraid? So I'm hoping today a story or two, an example or two, a quote or two is going to remind you and me that fear is a mirage. It's fake. It's an image. So if you choose to push through fear, you can accomplish some things that will literally blow your mind. My name is John Carver, and I really appreciate you watching the show today. We'll see you soon.